In this lesson, we'll be looking at princess seams. So basically, princess seams are seams that passes through either the shoulder or the armhole, across the bust point down to the waist line or to the hem. So the first thing we need to do is trace the pattern out. We'll first look at princess seam starting from the shoulder. So in order to do this, I'll need to connect the dart apex to the bust point. Our pattern has basically been divided into two, the center front and then the side front. So I need to mark this because you have to indicate. So remember, this is CF. This could be cut on fold here, and I have SF. So SF for side front, CF for center front. So this is the center front piece and this is the side front piece. So before separating the pattern, I'm going to add my grain line if I have not already done so. For the front pattern, the grain line is parallel to center front. So it's advisable to do this before you separate it, and then I'll also do the same, because once the pattern has been separated, it might be difficult to understand which side is, straight, especially if your waistline is not a straight line. So once we've done this, I'm going to separate the pattern now. So you can see the shoulder dart and the waist dart has been removed from the pattern. So I have two pattern pieces. So if you take note of this, you realize that at this point, this is my apex, I have this pointy bit. So which means that if I sew my fabric like this part of it will also be pointy. So I need to blend this. So you need to blend it, just make it round. Use your armhole curve, use your curve ruler, and then blend this. So we are basically going to take off this sharp edge. So before you do that, I'm going to indicate some balance points. When I'm sewing, I would know where I'll be able to match my pattern pieces. So these are the points I'm going to notch. And then I'll separate this. So this is what I have. This is my shoulder princess seam. So I'm going to have a continuous seam from the shoulder down to the waist. So before you can cut your fabric, we have to put our seam allowance right here. So I'm going to stick this, and then you add your seam allowance. Remember, our seam allowance is 1/2 inch. So you add seam allowance this way. So we'll do this and then separate. And this is it. So we'll now use this to cut our pattern. Once you cut your fabric and then sew it together, this is what it looks like. So as you can see, we have the princess seam coming all the way from midpoint of the shoulder down to the waistline. So this is how it is. So I have my back. So this is my back bodice. As you can see, we have a dart at back shoulder. So if your pattern has a dart, fine. If it does not have a dart, that's equally fine. So if you don't have a dart, just find the midpoint of your shoulder, or at least any point corresponding to what you have. So if your front bodice, you are working with the midpoint of your shoulder, that means you're also going to work with the midpoint of your shoulder on the back pattern. So if you happen to change the position, whatever position you put it on the front pattern is also the same position you need to use for the back bodice. I'm going to connect the dart, and then we'll also do the same for the second dart leg. So remember, this dart has to blend smoothly with this dart. So that's how you connect this. We're going to put our grain line as usual, and then the grain line as well, so you don't forget that. And you label, this is CB and this is SB for side back. So we also need our balance point. So I'm going to be using this mark here as my balance point, and then this mark as my balance point. So it's good to indicate this before you separate. So ideally, before cutting your pattern out of the paper, you should add a seam allowance to this part. That's the waist, side seam, armhole, and then the shoulder. Once this is done, you only just have to place this on another paper and then mark out the seam allowance for the princess seam. So move to the princess seam from the armhole. So now we'll be looking at the armhole dart. Still have our shoulder dart here. So basically what this means is that I'm going to be transferring this shoulder dart to the armhole dart. Remember, to get the princess seam is we're basically taking advantage of the darts. So I'll need to transfer this to the armhole while leaving this one here. So in order to transfer to the armhole, I'm going to find, as a guide, you can use the midpoint of your armhole. You can decide to go up higher, or go from your chest line, whatever position depending on the design you want to achieve. So but for now, for me, I'll be using half of my armhole. So my armhole measurement is 11. I'm going to get half of that, which is 0.5. This is the midpoint of my armhole. So I'm going to go with my curve. So to create the armhole princess seam, I'll need to move this. Remember, this is not part of our pattern. This is the dart. This is CF. Of course, we should have our grain lines before separating as usual. So I'm moving this here. Nice. This is taped down, and then we'll separate this piece. So as usual, remember to put in your balance marks. So basically, the balance marks makes it easier sewing, so you know what point matches with what point. So that's a balance mark here. Here, that's another balance mark. Right now, we need to smoothen this edge because it's really not smooth at that point. So then I remove that corner. So that's this. So in the same way, we'll be adding seam allowance. I'll be adding my 1/2 inch sewing allowance as usual. Separate this. So this is the armhole seam. So label this as side front, and this is center front. So here you can cut, unfold, or cut two, but this one is cut two. So this is the armhole princess seam. Remember, whatever position you use in front, you should also use at the back. So I'm going to find half of my armhole. So once you mark that, so you can use free hand or your curve. Then to eliminate this dart, I'm going to measure the distance here of the dart, and then I'm taking it off from here. So I will redraw my armhole. So this is my new armhole. This is gone. We need to adjust our seam line. So this is gone, and this part there's no need. So this is what we have. I've removed the parts we removed from the shoulder. Now I transferred my dart to the edge here, which we have cut out. We don't need this, and the shoulder seam is now straight. It's instead of the jag we had. So this is what we have: our center back piece and our side back. So as usual, we'll add our seam allowance to the princess seam so that we can sew it together. So use the princess seam from the shoulder. This is the front and then this is the back, while this is the armhole princess seam for the front and then the back.